Hello, welcome to the Red Sqirl Getting Started video. This video is our first steps tutorial for using Red Sqirl. In this tutorial, we will be familiarizing ourselves with the Red Sqirl user interface. Okay, so in this tutorial, we will learn about the Red Sqirl interface, how to copy data into HDFS, how to build a workflow, how to run that workflow, and finally, how to extract a result from that workflow. At this point, we'll assume you already know what Red Sqirl is, and that either you or your IT team installed it successfully. If you want to follow along this tutorial step by step on your local environment, you'll need to know where the Red Sqirl installation folder is and have the Red Sqirl pig package already installed. To sign in, we'll just use our OS username and password. Now, if this is the first time you're signing in, you'll be prompted with this window about updating your footer menu. We'll just click OK. So this is the Red Sqirl interface. First, let's outline some of the key components of Red Sqirl. On the left hand side, we have two tabs. The flowchart canvas. This is where a workflow will be executed, and the actions that we can use for our analysis we'll find down here in the canvas footer. And on the other tab, we have our remote file system, where we can connect to any SSH server. For example, you can SSH localhost, which will correspond to the server that Red Sqirl is installed on. So let's do that. And we enter our password. And now we can see our remote file system. On the top right, we can find the Help tab. The Help tab is made up of a main section where we can find generic options and an action section. The action section describes each of the drag and drop actions that we can find in the footer. Every time we click on something, the Help tab will update automatically. If we want to keep the Help tab on a particular section, we'll just use this tick box here. And lastly, on the bottom right, we have the Hadoop distributed file system. So those are the main parts of the Red Sqirl interface. Now, our next step is to get some data for us to analyze. Inside the Red Sqirl installation folder, we've already given you some data for this tutorial. So what we need to do now is copy this data into our HDFS. So to do this, we'll go back over to our remote file system, and we need to find the Red Sqirl installation folder. In my case, the path is this. And what we're looking for here is a folder called tutorial data, and inside that we want the getting started file. So we drag that over into our HDFS. In this getting started file, we have a dataset from a UK based online retailer. The dataset is every transaction for this retailer over a 2-year period. It is a transactional dataset with over 400,000 rows. The company mainly sells unique all occasion gifts, and a lot of their customers will be wholesalers. Okay, so now that we have our data in our HDFS, we can start an analysis. To do this, we just have to go back to the flowchart canvas section. So what we're going to do in this tutorial is summarize this data in order to find out which country has the highest sales and quantity of products sold. So let's start to analyze the data. An analysis always starts with a source action. So let's set this up first. Here we'll be reading a pipe delimited file, so we'll read it with a file text source. So we find our file text source and we just drag it from the footer onto the canvas. And now we just need to double click it to configure it. So we'll leave the name as it is for now. And now we'll see a step-by-step window. This particular file doesn't have any headers, so we'll just click Next. And now in this part, we have to choose the path that we save the file into. So let's find it now. We find our Getting Started. And now the data is in the source section. We can see it here. In the next step, we can change the field and the type by clicking on this edit button over here on the left. Here we'll rename the fields. So our first field, we want to change this to the invoice number. Our second field, we want to change this to the stock code. The third one, we want this to be the description. This is the description of the products that were sold. The fourth one, we want to have this as the quantity. Next one, we want to have this as the invoice date. The sixth one, we want to have this as the unit price. The seventh one, this is going to be our customer ID. And finally, the last one is going to be the country. We can also change the data type here on the right. So what we're going to do is we'll change the invoice date to string. And we'll also change the invoice number to string. You can find more information about the different data types in our help section. So we'll click OK. And now we can see the data with the new field names that we've just changed. And that's it. We've set up the source for our data. You can now see that the arcs around the source action have changed. The arcs around the icon give information about the status of the action. To check what the arcs mean, just click here on the legend, and then to hide it, we'll just click it again. So let's recap. We've gone through the interface, we've copied the data into HDFS, and we've set up a source file and configured it. Now we're ready to start the data processing. Again, what we're going to do with the data is to find out which country has the highest sales value and quantity of products sold. So let's start. On the pig footer menu, we want to use the pig aggregator icon. It should be this fourth one here, and we drag that from the footer onto our canvas. Now, to link our source to the pig action, we click slightly outside and watch as the arrow follows our cursor, and then we click on our pig action. And now we just double click to configure it. We'll leave the name as it is for now. And now we have another step-by-step window. On this first page, it lets us choose the field that we want to aggregate by. For our purpose, we want to aggregate by country. And we'll click Next. On the second page, we can do the operation field by field. We can use the generation menu over here. This will let us add predefined fields to the table. We can see all the different options available over here. So we want to use the copy, and we'll click OK. We can also have a more granular choice of generation by clicking on the configure button. Each of the tabs are a different configuration option. So we want the sum, and what we're looking to get is the quantity. And we'll just click generate. And lastly, let's add a new field. So we'll click on this plus, and we will give it a field name of total sales. And for this field, we'll use the text editor by clicking on the pencil. And what we want is the sum, and we want the sum of the quantity multiplied by the unit price. And we'll give that a float type. We can also change the position of the rows by using this box here. So we'll just put a 1 and it'll move it to the top of the row, or we can use these buttons. Note that these checkboxes don't all need to be ticked in order for us to continue. It's only for arranging these rows. On this next page, we can sort the data. So let's sort the total sales, and we want it in descending. And we'll click next. And this final page is the filtering and the format of the output. The filtering option is another text editor, and we can just create a condition, but we'll just leave it as it is for now. And down here we can choose the delimiter of the output. So let's use a comma. And by default, the output type is compressed. In Red Sqirl, the output format is important for linking one action to the next. The two types need to be compatible. If we want, we can also choose to do an audit of the output, but we'll leave that for now. So that's it. We've created our first job in Red Sqirl. We have our source and the aggregation action, which is ready to run. But before we run the workflow, let's just save it first. So we go to File, Save As, and we'll call this file Getting Started, and we'll click OK. It'll be directly saved into the Red Sqirl folder. Okay, so now let's run the workflow. We select the final action, and we go to Project, Save and Run. Now, since the pig action is using MapReduce, it'll take a minute or so to run. And while it's running, the canvas can't be modified. But what we can do is create more workflows while it's running. So we can create a new canvas and just drag and drop any new actions. We can create multiple canvases, and also while the workflow is running, we can check the progress in the Progress Manager. We'll just refresh it. In here we'll see all of our processes, and if we want, we can kill or pause any of them. We can also check the logs in our Uzi control over here. And that's it. As soon as the process is finished, we can see the results. We can just go to the action, click on Options, and click on Data Output. And in here we can see our results. Up here we can find the path, and we can also download it as a CSV. So let's do that now. So we were looking for the sales data for the online retailer, and we wanted to find out which country had the highest sales value and quantity of product sold. And what we can see here is that the United Kingdom had the highest sales total. You can also see that the Netherlands have quite a high sales sum, but the sales quantity is pretty low. Now the last part I want to show is that we can reuse the results in Red Sqirl. If we create another action, the input data already exists, so there's no need for it to be recalculated. And that's it. That's the end of the tutorial. We've covered each section of the interface. We copied data into HDFS. We built a workflow. We ran that workflow, and then we extracted the results. So I hope you found this tutorial useful. If you have any more questions, you can email us at info@redsqirl.com.